Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch in the WWE Network. For the entire month of July, I'm reviewing every WWE installment of the Great American Bash pay-per-view. This week, it's the 2007 installment, hailing from San Jose, California, and we'll get started right now. Kicking off the show is United States Championship matchup between the defending champion MVP and Matt Hardy. This was, of course, before their entire year-long feud had kicked off over the U.S. Championship, all the challenges, the tag team titles. Before any of that occurred, came this contest. At the most patriotic event of the year, the U.S. Championship was defended in the opening matchup. Much like the 04 installment, the U.S. title match kicked off the show, so I thought that was a nice touch. But for what it was, I thought this was a very good contest. Like I just said, Matt Hardy and MVP had one of the best feuds in SmackDown history. Definitely one of the best feuds of the year in 07 and 08 when Matt Hardy returned from injury. So a very good contest from these two. MVP had just won the title about 2 months prior. They had a nice thing going. Even before their entire feud started, they'd already really kind of started the feud a few weeks before this. So good stuff here. Very good contest. Matt Hardy comes up short of winning the championship. MVP emerges victorious and is still your United States champion on this show. So it was far too soon for him to be dropping the championship. And like I just said, it really kicked off that great year-long feud between Hardy and MVP, widely regarded by fans to be one of the best feuds in SmackDown history. So that was a very good contest to kick off the show, kind of set the tone for the rest of the night. Up next, we had the Cruiserweight Open matchup, kind of notorious and infamous for the ending result of the contest. I believe the final pay-per-view that would hold a Cruiserweight Championship matchup on it for WWE. But Cruiserweight Open, as you know, has open challenge from any Cruiserweights in the WWE. The participants were the defending champion Chavo Guerrero, Jimmy Wang Yang, Shannon Moore Funaki, and Jamie Noble. But of course, as the bell rang, Hornswoggle, who was still with Finlay at the time, ran across the ring and went underneath the ring. So he was technically a combatant in this contest. And like I said, I've said this a number of thousands of times, but I wasn't a fan during this point in time, so I wasn't watching the pay-per-view live. This is my first time watching the show back. But that being said, though, did people know that Hornswoggle was going to win? For those of you that were watching live, for those of you that did purchase the pay-per-view at the time that it was airing, did you know that Hornswoggle would win? Was it that predictable because he ran across the ring? You technically knew the outcome of the contest. But you take that out of the equation for a second. This was a very fun contest like the Cruiserweights are known to put on. Much like TNA's X Division, the Cruiserweight division was very unique and very special to the SmackDown brand for the many years that it was around from the early 2000s to 2007. But it got to a point where WWE didn't want to carry it on anymore, so they just treated the title like a joke and gave it to Hornswoggle on the show after he scored the Tadpole Splash. I believe Jamie Noble to pick up the victory, your new Cruiserweight champion. I believe the youngest and shortest Cruiserweight champion in the title's history. So he wins the championship. The Cruiserweights try to go after him. He escapes. And I think Jamie Noble and Hornswoggle try to get the title back from him in the weeks that followed, but failed to do so. Hornswoggle just stopped carrying around the title altogether, especially when the whole Finlay thing started and their thing with Vince McMahon, the illegitimate son, whatever. So he was stripped of the championship shortly thereafter. The title was deemed vacant and later inactive in early 2008. So not a good way for one of the most prestigious titles in the entire business, in the wrestling business, dating back to the WCW days, for it to go out. Not the best way for the title to go out, with Hornswoggle being deemed the champion, and what was deemed a dark day by wrestling fans. I wouldn't say this ruined the entire show, and people were receptive to Hornswoggle winning the championship, because by this point he wasn't a joke, and that would be when he turns face a couple of months later. But that was that. Chavo, I noticed, had a long, storied history at the Great American Bash. If you really look back at it, in 2004, not 2000, I'm trying to think here, 2004 was when he was involved in that great Cruiserweight Championship matchup with Rey Mysterio. I've done reviews on all these shows, so you can go back and watch them when you get the time, so cheap plug there. 04, great Cruiserweight title matchup with Rey Mysterio. 05, I'm struggling to think what Chavo did that year, because I know the year afterwards, in 2006, he was in the main event. Was wrestling in the main event, but he turned on Rey Mysterio, became one of the most over heels in the entire WWE at that point in 2006, when he feuded with the former World Heavyweight Champion, costing Rey Mysterio the title. and giving the title to Booker T, or King Booker at the time. So Chavo Guerrero had a very long and storied history at these type of events at the Great American Bash. Let me just double check, because I have all the results right here from the past videos that I did. So that's 06. Let's go back to 05. Was he involved in anything in 05? No, I don't think he was. And looking back at the card here, on 05, I don't think he was even on the show. Was he on? I think he might have been on Raw at the time. He might have been drafted Raw. I don't fucking know. But, yeah, so Chavo has kind of a history at these kind of events. He loses the title here. Kind of a joke of a matchup, but that's what it was. Can't really say anything more than that, but just pretty much this moment was seen as the death of the Cruiserweight division and the title, which is a shame because a lot of people see it as a very prestigious title. It can come in handy with a lot of Cruiserweights in today's WWE. Will the Cruiserweight division ever make a comeback in today's WWE? That's the ever-popular question. I say yes, as a WWE Network exclusive show. I think that'd be great. Some people say they would like it back on Raw or SmackDown, devote an hour to the Cruiserweights, much like WCW did when they had their 3-hour Nitros. I don't at all see that being a possibility, so I really wish people would stop saying that. It would be great, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying it's not plausible or realistic in today's day and age. But it would be great to see the Cruiserweight division back. Like I said, there's a lot of people that aren't doing anything, and they got rid of a lot of Cruiserweights. I mean, Rey Mysterio was pretty much done. Sin Cara, I guess. Yoshitatsu's gone. Evan Bourne's gone. So a lot of the Cruiserweights that they could have used are now gone. Tyson Kidd and Gabriel are down in NXT right now. But it would be cool to see back at some point. And, just my 2 cents on that. So up next, we had Carlito versus the Sandman in a Singapore Cane on a pole match. Anything in a pole match is a train wreck. This match wasn't really all that bad, and Carlito was kind of floundering. I mean, he was doing some stuff, former IC and United States champion, but they really dropped the ball on Carlito. I think he could have been something more. Could he have been a world champion? Who knows? I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to say no. But the guy wasn't over heel for the time that he, for the first few years that he started. And this was 3 years after he made his debut, and he was just kind of floundering around in the mid-card, doing basically nothing in this throwaway feud with the Sandman. The Sandman, it's funny because I watched the 05 and 06 One Night Stand pay-per-views, and I've done reviews for them here on the channel. Go back and watch those. Cheap plug. But the Sandman was over like a motherfucker in those shows because the guy was an ECW original. He was crazy over in ECW. But like many people have said in the past, both wrestlers and fans alike, the Sandman was all about the gimmick. The guy was never the best wrestler. The guy was always about the beer and the swearing and just the trashy look. That the persona that he had was over with the fans. Like the ECW version of Stone Cold. And I mean, I know the Sandman was kind of around before Stone Cold, and maybe that was kind of the reason why Stone Cold who was what he was, you know what I mean? That's an entirely different argument for an entirely different day. But anyway, this whole why the Sandman was over, because he was over because of the gimmick. The guy was never a great wrestler. The guy was a shitty wrestler, but the guy's gimmick was great. But when you bring him into the WWE and WWE's version of the ECW show of their brand, their version of ECW, and it's extremely watered down. It's not what it was. And by this point, after Sandman was taken off of ECW and drafted to Raw for some reason, I have no fucking idea why that was. But he started up the feud with Carlito, really did nothing, lost his contest. Carlito emerged victorious, which was probably for the better, because he was he had more potential than Sandman did at this point. But Sandman didn't last too much longer. He was in the WWE maybe for another month or two before getting released. Because I'm not really surprised. They had no plans with the guy. And like I said, when he came out and he wasn't drinking, he had the Singapore Cane in him, but it just wasn't what it used to be with the Sandman. So I'm not surprised that they didn't do anything with him, because they completely ruined the character. I mean, it wasn't even PG by this point, so they could have done that shit with the beer and just going crazy and all that kind of shit, all the swearing. But it was an extremely watered down version of the Sandman, so it was just kind of sad to see him in this state in his match against Carlito. But up next, we had our Women's Championship matchup of the night between the defending champion, Candice Michelle, and the former champion, Melina. Good match while it lasted. I mean, they tried to pack a lot of stuff into a very short span of time. But for what it was, I thought this was a good contest. The first actual women's match we've had in the Great American Bash pay-per-view. Because if you watch my reviews of the 04, 05, and 06 installments of the show, you would hear me complaining about the constant bras and panties matches that they had. And I'm not complaining. I mean, I know I was ranting and whatever about it, and I love to see it. I mean, it's great for a male like me. I would love to see that kind of stuff again. But as a wrestling fan, it was completely trashy. It was offensive to the women's division, to feminists worldwide and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It just wasn't right. We need the fucking wrestling. That wasn't wrestling. It was trashy. It was entertaining for the males, but for everybody else, it's just kind of discriminating and offensive. So I'm glad we actually got a women's championship matchup on that show, but maybe I spoke too soon, because shortly after this match ended, after Candice Michelle, who was improving at a fast rate, she was never the best worker, but during these series of matches with Melina, she showed her true potential. Not one of the best workers of all time, like I just said, but she did show that she did have something in the tank and had a few good matches with Melina, with this being one of them. So Candice Michelle comes out victorious in this contest, but I spoke too soon, as backstage, the Hardys are seen talking backstage before Jeff Hardy's about to go out for his Intercontinental title matchup, and Candice Michelle comes by, just taking a whole bunch of water bottles right in front of the Hardy boys and just dumping them all over her. Like I said, entertaining for the males, but still like discriminating towards women and stuff like that. But not as offensive as the bras and panties matchup. And this was like it wasn't what I wanted to see as a wrestling fan, as a male. It was awesome, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't until maybe about a year or so later when they went PG, when they stopped doing this shit altogether. But it was funny just to see the facial reactions on the Hardys' faces. But even at the Great American Bash, even when there's not a bras and panties matchup, you still get stuff like this. But anyway, we go to our next contest, Intercontinental Championship matchup, Jeff Hardy versus Umaga. These guys had a great series of matches. You go back and watch my review of the One Night Stand 2008 pay-per-view here on the channel. Another cheap plug for you. That was a year later, but whether it be in 06, 07, 08, 09, it doesn't matter the year. Hardy and Umaga, Jeff Hardy and Umaga that is, had a great rivalry, a great series of matches during this period of time when Jeff Hardy came back, when Umaga was just reigning as the Intercontinental Champion. And this was his second reign with the title. He had just won back the championship a few weeks prior, so it was a bit premature to take the title off of him and give it to Hardy. But they would do that many months later in September, I think on an episode of Raw, and they gave Jeff Hardy the championship in September, and he would have a 6-month reign with the title. So that being said, regardless of the year, Jeff Hardy and Umaga always had a great series of matches. Umaga, I think, in my personal opinion, was a very underrated worker. He was kind of like the Samoa Joe of the WWE, not having the best size or shape. I mean, the guy was a absolute juggernaut of a man, but the guy didn't have the best, physical shape or physical tone, whatever you want to call it. But the guy could go in the ring at a very fast pace. He was agile. He was had very good chemistry, whoever he stepped in the ring with. Jeff Hardy, in my opinion, he had the best chemistry with, as well as John Cena. Those guys had a great series of matches in early 2007. And Umaga the 06 was kind of the year of Umaga in his matches with John Cena and with Jeff Hardy. I almost said Shelton Benjamin, maybe Shelton Benjamin too, with Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania. So 2007, although he never won a world title that year, was kind of the year of Umaga being built up as this absolute Goliath of a man. But very good matchup here between Umaga and Jeff Hardy. Umaga still your Intercontinental Champion. Up next, we had John Morrison versus CM Punk for the ECW Championship, only weeks removed from when John Morrison was rebranded from Johnny Nitro, got the new theme music, the new name, the new look, new everything. He didn't have the This Ain't No Make-Believe entrance theme song at this point. He had some generic version of it without the lyrics. I don't know when he would get that theme song, maybe a little later on in the summer. But him and Punk would have a great series of matches, from Night of Champions to Great American Bash to SummerSlam to the episode of ECW in September when he won that championship in that 15 Minutes of Fame matchup or whatever. Maybe I say great. I thought these matches were good. I never saw the SummerSlam or Vengeance matchups. I've only seen bits and pieces of them. But after watching this contest, Morrison and Punk had some very good chemistry together. I enjoyed this matchup. I know CM Punk said on his DVD that he and Morrison had a shitty series of matches at the pay-per-views before having a very good matchup on ECW where he won the championship. I thought this was a good matchup. I didn't really see many problems with this match at all. So I don't know what CM Punk was talking about. I mean, I know he's critical of his work, so maybe that was it, but I thought these matches were good. Maybe he was talking about the fact they didn't get much time. This matchup went about 7 minutes, and the crowd was kind of flat for it. I mean, John Morrison, like I just said, was recently rebranded, so they didn't really give a fuck about him at this point in time. CM Punk was kind of getting over as an underdog, so he was over. But the feud, since it was on ECW, not a lot of people watched ECW at the time, so it didn't really get the exposure that it needed for fans to recognize these guys. Because this was right after the pay-per-view. The pay-per-views went tri-branded. Okay, so a lot of people who didn't watch ECW had no idea what this matchup was all about, or just didn't care. So that being said, though, I thought this was a good contest. I didn't think it was their best matchup. Like I said, their best contest occurred when CM Punk won the ECW title from Morrison on an episode of ECW in September. But I still thought this was a good contest. John Morrison emerged victorious, still the ECW champion. Another rematch at the SummerSlam pay-per-view would take place. So it was kind of like the holding pattern for this feud. A lot of the matches on the show would be that way, and I'll get to that when I give my final thoughts on the show. But even so, I thought this was a good match, and maybe Punk was just being a little too harsh. I didn't think this was as bad as I thought it would be. I set my standards a bit low because of what CM Punk said on his DVD, in that he said this would be a shitty series of matches. I thought it was a good match. Just my 2 cents, though. Up next, we had Dusty Rhodes versus Randy Orton in a cowbell matchup. Now, this was kind of stemming off of the whole thing with Randy Orton calling himself the Legend Killer, and right around the time that Cody Rhodes actually made his debut. In this entire angle, they were kind of going off of Dusty Rhodes being inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame earlier that year, and Cody Rhodes making his in-ring debut on Raw, I think only a few days prior to this pay-per-view. And he didn't get involved in this contest until the end, preventing Orton from kicking Dusty Rhodes in the head. And that was kind of the whole end game of this entire feud, was Orton punting Dusty Rhodes. 2007, when he really was the year that he really started to get that punt kick over as his solidified finishing maneuver, as, killing the legend. He would go on to punt John Cena, and John Cena's father even, at Unforgiven a couple of months later. So that was and he would also take out Shawn Michaels with that very same kick a few months prior as well. And this also occurred on Shawn Michaels' birthday, which Orton pointed out in the pre-match interview backstage. But anyway, I thought this was a good contest. I mean, Dusty Rhodes, for as old as he is, the guy can fucking go in the ring. Is he capable of a 5-star classic? Absolutely not. But I thought this would be a much bigger train wreck than it would end up being. This was a very good contest, and not like I said, not the most well-wrestled match in the world, but given the circumstances, given the stipulation, the cowbell contest, I'm not a big fan of strap matches. This is a bit different because you had to pin your opponent, and there was a cowbell attached to the rope this time, or a bull rope contest, whatever the hell the matchup was called. Instead of a strap, and you didn't have to touch the turnbuckles. I never liked that kind of matchup. I didn't like it at Great American Bash 04 when JBL won the title from Eddie, and I never liked it when Punk did it with Umaga a number of years later at Extreme Rules. Not a fan of the strap match. But that being said, though, for what this was, the matchup, the stipulation of the matchup, worked in their favor, because Dusty Rhodes, like I said before, for as old as he is, he kind of worked around the stipulation, or Orton carried most of the matchup. I thought this was a fun brawl, especially considering the feud was so well built going into this pay-per-view that people wanted to see Dusty Rhodes get his hands on Randy Orton. And above all else, the fact that this matchup took place at the Great American Bash was so fucking fitting, because not only is Dusty Rhodes the Great American Dream, his gimmick and whatever, but the Great American Bash is arguably his baby. It is his pay-per-view. The guy created the pay-per-view, arguably, in the late 80s when it was a WCW tradition for many, many, many years. And it would obviously get watered down when WWE took it over and adopted it as its own in 2004. And I mean, you go back and watch my reviews of those shows. I didn't like 04, 05, or to 06. All of them were pretty shitty, in my opinion, mediocre to bad. But this matchup I thought was very, very good. Dusty Rhodes very fitting and wrestling on the show. Orton obviously going over, just furthering his push, furthering his heat after taking out RVD and now Dusty Rhodes. He would go on to feud for the WWE Championship a month later against John Cena in what was at the time a blockbuster contest in the first of about 500,000 matches the two would have against each other on pay-per-view. But anyway, though, I thought this was a fun brawl. Orton goes over, mission accomplished, furthering the end game of this feud with Orton kicking Dusty Rhodes in the head. I think that would occur the next night on Raw. And also kicking off the career of Cody Rhodes, who is where he is today. So up next, we had the World Heavyweight Championship matchup. The Great Khali defending against Batista and Kane in a triple threat match for the World Championship. So the matchup was kind of changed because Edge was the World Heavyweight Champion at the time. He came down with an injury. He was scheduled to face Kane at the pay-per-view for the title, and I think Batista and Khali were going to face off in a one-on-one matchup. So with Edge out of the equation, they just merged the two matches together and merged the two feuds together and made it a triple threat match between Khali, Batista, and Kane for the title at the Great American Bash pay-per-view. Another one of the matches where I figured it would be a complete shitfest, considering Khali is involved for one thing. Batista is not the best worker, a good worker, not the best worker. Same thing with Kane. So I figured putting all three of these same guys in the same matchup would be a complete shitfest of a contest. But it ended up being pretty good. I didn't like the way that Khali was being positioned as weak as he was. He was put through the table by Batista and Kane. At various points in the matchup, did he made to look weak by being taken out by Batista and Kane with a choke slam, spine buster, whatever. And at various points, he could have lost the World Heavyweight title. I mean, I know it's good to make some of your champions look vulnerable and make fans believe that there is a chance that that the title can be taken off of them. But Khali, even though his undefeated streak was snapped a few months prior by one John Cena, he was still being built up as a monster heel over on SmackDown. So I didn't really like the booking of Khali in this contest. I'm not saying I'm Khali's biggest fan, but as a monster heel, he should have been protected a bit more in this matchup. But for what it was, another matchup I wouldn't call great, but it was good and exceeded expectations. Khali comes up victorious, still the World Heavyweight Champion. Another one of those matches where you figure it's a holding pattern. You know they're building towards Batista Khali, so Kane takes a pinfall, and they obviously build towards Batista and Khali at the 2007 SummerSlam event. So you knew the ending outcome. It was obvious. But the matchup, while not great, I thought was better than expected. It was good from what I would call it as, from what I would judge it as. So Khali's still your World Heavyweight Champion. Up next, we had a brief segment. We had a video package promoting the return of Triple H to the WWE at SummerSlam, the King of Kings thing. Triple H had been out with an injury since January of that year, since tearing his quad, I think it was, at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view. So that was that. But after that promo aired, out comes King Booker, who had just been drafted to the Raw brand, talking about how he was the rightful King of Kings and not Triple H. So those two go on to feud going into SummerSlam. Booker T would also call out Jerry Lawler. It was weird because he called out Jerry Lawler. He said, "Bring me your crown right now." Jerry said, "Okay, come and get it." Booker T just tucked his tail between his legs and just walked away. I mean, the guy's fucking 60-something years old. You're too scared to go over and beat up Jerry Lawler. Like, that made no sense, especially for someone like King Booker, who was, like a legitimate tough guy, not like a scrawny, like Miz-like heel or something like that. He was a legitimate tough guy, Booker T, King Booker, whatever. So the fact that he backed down from Lawler was a bit strange. So the booking of this segment was a bit awkward, but what it basically did was plant the seeds for the future feud between King Booker and Triple H going into Triple H's return at SummerSlam. Triple H's return didn't really come off as hot as it probably should have. I didn't watch, of course I'm not saying that I watched the SummerSlam pay-per-view from that year, but after the video package aired, there was really no monster pop or Triple H chant. People were just like, Maybe people knew that he was coming back, so it wasn't a shocker, but from what I know, this was the first announcement of him coming back at the pay-per-view. Maybe they announced it a few weeks prior, I don't know, but from what I understand, this is the first promo promoting Triple H's return at that pay-per-view, and no one really gave a shit. There wasn't complete silence, but I thought there would be a bigger fanfare around Triple H's return, but that was what it was. Up next, we had our main event for the WWE Championship, defending champion John Cena up against the up-and-coming Bobby Lashley. Now, Bobby Lashley, give him as much shit as you want. The guy can't talk, whatever else. And he should have probably had a mouthpiece. Why WWE didn't figure that out 2 years into his WWE run is beyond me. But the guy could go in the ring. Again, not a 5-star match athlete, caliber athlete, but the guy was extremely athletic. He was extremely agile, and he could do a lot of stuff in the ring that you would not expect him to do. And John Cena, at this point in time, was still trying to silence the critics and saying that he couldn't wrestle. But him and Lashley, you put that match on pay-per-view. From a story standpoint, the match is there. The feel of the big fight feel of this contest is there. Because Bobby Lashley was being positioned as one of the biggest up-and-coming guys in the company and a future world champion after becoming, winning the Battle of the Billionaires bout at WrestleMania 23 and being a 2-time ECW champion and the U.S. champion. John Cena was still the guy. In the video packages promoting this match, there were at least 3 of them. And there was one hyping up Bobby Lashley, one hyping up John Cena, airing throughout the night, and then one promoting the matchup itself between Cena and Lashley, calling it a Clash of the Titans and stuff like that. And Cena himself was also still trying to cement his legacy. Yes, he had been WWE Champion for about 10 months by this point, but he was still only 2 years into his WWE main event run. So at this point, people were still trying to buy into him as a main event player. He obviously was at this point after being on top for 2 years straight. But I mean, by this point, the point I'm trying to make here is that he was still trying to prove himself to the fans and management alike. But Cena and Lashley, a very good concept for what it was. I'm not saying, like I said before, a 5-star Matt classic or an instant classic or anything along those lines. For what it was, the feel that they gave the contest and Lashley being posed as a legitimate threat to John Cena, it was a good matchup. It was much like John Cena and The Rock. I'm not at all comparing Bobby Lashley to The Rock in any shape, form, or fashion, but the matchup was similar in that it was all about the story told and if Lashley could put Cena away. And Lashley was fucking over. The guy got a good reaction when he came out, but when he was almost about to put Cena away, he was being positioned as a John Cena-like figure in that half the audience booed him, half the audience cheered him. Same with John Cena. The crowd reaction to this matchup was kind of split. Both were still fan favorites at the time, so I could see why that reaction wouldn't be what it was. But some fans were anxious to see Bobby Lashley take that title off of John Cena and say, we've seen enough. We want to see a fresh face in the main event scene. And Bobby Lashley was that guy. So a very strong showing from Bobby Lashley. A much better matchup than what I thought it was going to be. So good stuff there. John Cena emerges victorious. A clean victory over Bobby Lashley, which was rare at the time. After the contest, the two shake hands. They hug it out. John Cena celebrates. End of the show. And Bobby Lashley was a very strange case. Because after this, the next night, or maybe 8 days later, I think the next night, he'd have a match against Mr. Kennedy, got injured, and that was fucking it for Bobby Lashley. So the guy goes from the main event of a WWE pay-per-view for the WWE Championship against the face of the company to being injured and never being seen again. He was out with that shoulder injury for a very long time. By the time he was ready to make a comeback, he left the company, he quit, got released, from wherever you hear it from, it's different from everybody, whoever you talk to. I think he left on his own terms, but they granted the release, whatever. But he never made a comeback, that's the bottom line. So he was being positioned as a top guy in the company on the fucking Raw brand. Not on SmackDown, not on ECW, but on Raw. The guy was facing the face of the company for the fucking WWE title, the most prestigious prize in the company, gets injured and is gone. So it's kind of amazing to think that they didn't have any plans for the guy when he came back, or I don't fucking know, but it was still a very strange turn of events. But for what this was, you don't take into effect the aftermath of this matchup. For what this was, I thought this was a good contest, and by main event pay-per-view standards, I thought it was a solid matchup. And especially compared to the other pay-per-views that we've seen from the Great American Bash, in WWE's installments, that is, not the WCW shows, but the ones that I've reviewed, 04, 05, and 06. Maybe you compare the Great American Bash to other pay-per-views from 07. It pales in comparison. I can't tell you for sure because I haven't seen every pay-per-view from the year of 07 in WWE. But based off compared to the 04, 05, and 06 installments of the Great American Bash from WWE, this was like the fucking WrestleMania of them all. I mean, 04 was terrible. You go back and watch that one. 05 was slightly better, and 06 was just fucking weird because the card was changed up with Lashley getting injured and Khali getting injured, Super Crazy getting injured. The whole card was up in complete disarray, and I talked about that in my review. Go back and check it out. Really weird stuff there, but anyway, though, this was the fucking easily the best installment of the Great American Bash out of all of them, by far. So if there's any one pay-per-view of these four, I haven't watched the 08 edition yet. I know what happens because I was a fan at the time, but I didn't watch the pay-per-view. I just know what happened. But I'll be watching that and reviewing it for next week's show, for next week's edition of WrestleRant, so make sure to tune in for that. But of these four, this is definitely the best one yet. Really no match in the card that really stands out above the rest. Just a lot of good action. No great matches, just a lot of good matches. MVP versus Hardy, Umaga versus Jeff Hardy, also a very good contest. Orton versus Dusty Rhodes, better than expected. Triple Threat World Title match, better than expected. And Cena versus Lashley, better than expected. So that's kind of the theme of this show, better than expected, those 3 words. It exceeded expectations in being a better than average show, in my opinion at least, compared to the other installments of this fucking event that WWE ruined when they took it as their own after taking it from WCW when they bought them out. But anyway, though, a good show, a good solid show overall that kind of built up SummerSlam and Randy Orton being positioned as a top heel. The rematches for John Morrison and CM Punk and all these other matches on the card that would kind of set the stage for SummerSlam, King Booker, and Triple H. So overall, I enjoy this event much more than I did any of the other ones. I look forward to watching the 08 show. I'll be reviewing that, as I said before, for next week's edition of WrestleRant, so make sure to tune in next week for that. But in the meantime and in between time, if you want to suggest to me any pay-per-views you want me to watch and review here on the channel for WrestleRant, make sure to tweet me on the Twitter at WrestleRant. Find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews. Bleacher Report, same thing, and YouTube, same thing. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. I'm Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch you guys down the road.